Hello class, so this is the first lecture that is covering the foundation of biochemistry. So you can just think of this part of the lecture as just a brief intro of the things that we will be learning this semester for part one of biochemistry. So what is biochemistry? You can think of it in many different ways. So this is why I kind of listed them here. You can read them for your own understanding. But basically, this is where chemistry meets biology and where that interface is. And so we start to know as far as chemistry, dealing with molecules and atoms and different reactions. We're looking at that at the cellular aspects. And we can kind of see what is actually happening chemically within our bodies, but also not only our bodies, but what's happening with plants as well as bacteria. And so you can think of this tree of life that we will be discussing later on, but that is what all of biochemistry is. It's the biology thinking, but still having the foundation of chemistry focus with that biology in mind. And so when you learn functional groups in organic chemistry, that is not going away. So this is a reminder that you need to refresh your memory on your functional groups. So these are common functional groups that are found in biochemistry. I won't read through them all. You can do that yourself as I will be providing these slides. But just looking at the slide, just look at the actual letters. That is what this particular figure is focusing on when it says a particular functional group. So this is an acyl group. So don't worry about that dash to the side. That this is something that it could be anything that's pretty much attached to that, but the basic focus of being a functional group is right here, where you have the oxygen double bond to the carbon to some R group. Here, this one could be confusing because, like, okay, do you have an R here, R there? Do you have an OH there? What, honestly, within this particular figure, they are just focusing on the letters. And so when you have a carbon double bonded to oxygen, this is a carbonyl group. And that carbonyl group can be right here as well. And so since they have a focus of an R group that's attached to it, that's why this one is an acyl group. And this is just focusing on the carbonyl itself. And then so on and so forth with the rest of the groups listed here. You're looking at the letters, and that is what is correlating to what is being named here. As far as any more functional groups, once again, we have this carbonyl, but now it's highlighting this whole thing where this carbonyl is attached to a hydrogen, so that is an aldehyde group. Remember, we have an R on both sides of this carbonyl group. You have a ketone, and then this is a carboxyl group. So you can have it looking like this, or have that H replacing negative charge on the oxygen. It's only negative charge because it's missing the hydrogen. And so on and so forth with the rest of the functional groups. That I can just let you read that for yourself. Here are some more common functional groups, just to have it in your memory and just try to lock these things in, where you can just see a methyl, ethyl, a phenyl group, hydroxyl with the OH. You have the ether with the oxygen and R group on each side, and so on and so forth. And here are some more common functional groups that is within biochemistry. I'll let you read this on your own, but these slides will be given to you. This is just a reminder to refresh your memory on these specific functional groups. And then one of the other things, as far as knowing your functional groups, most of the times when I give you a test, you'll see a structure, and then you're going to have to be able to label or name the functional groups that are presented in the compound. And so this right here is an enzyme. It's acetyl coenzyme A. You will see this a lot in biochemistry. We'll talk about that more in detail later. But just know, as far as fundamentally right now, just make sure you're becoming more and more familiar with functional groups. And then as far as reactions, some very, very common reactions that you'll see over and over in biochemistry is the condensation reaction, where you have a carboxyl group, and then right here they have an amino group, and you have condensation happen where there is a removal of hydrogen. And then right here, this is what we will call a peptide bond. We will discuss more of that later, but just know when you break those bonds and you're breaking it with water, then that is a hydrolysis reaction. So you have condensation, where you have two molecules being combined into one, and then hydrolysis, where that one molecule is being broken into two by water. And so, therefore, water is an essential role of life. And so H2O is the key to understanding the behavior of macromolecule. It is considered the solvent of life, and all living transformations occur in aqueous media. And so as far as elements, that is essential to animal life and health, the four most abundant elements are hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. And so you want to make sure you kind of memorize that and get familiar. Yes, there are other elements that are essential and come in bulk, but that is the four most abundant ones. And then we have here listed some other bulk elements that is within animal life and health. And as you probably can guess, with sodium and calcium and potassium and so on and so forth. And you also have trace elements as well, that is also essential to animal life. And you'll see these elements come up as we go throughout the semester of talking about the topic of biochemistry. And so this is more so of the biology portion, not as much chemistry. And so this is a reminder, you probably learned all of this in your previous biology classes. But on the left side, you have a bacteria cell, and on the right side you have an animal cell. Take note of the size difference between the two cells. And so the first aspect that we're going to be looking at is the plasma membrane, which is on the outside of the cells for both the bacteria cell and the animal cell, and they are composed of lipids and protein that form a thin, tough, pliable, hydrophobic barrier around the cell. Next is the cytoplasm, which is within the cell, as you can see right here, and it's composed of aqueous solution, the cytosol, and a variety of suspended particles with specific functions. And these are the suspended particles. And then next we have the ribosome depicted right here, as you can see from this figure. And this is the site of protein synthesis. Next, you have nucleoid and nucleus. And so the nucleoid is found for bacteria cells, and the nucleus is found within an animal cell. And what makes nucleus a nucleus is because it has a nuclear membrane, where in the bacteria there is no membrane around the nucleoid. And this is where genetic information is found within the cell. And so, as we talked about, I talked about a little bit briefly that with biochemistry, we talk about plants, we talk about bacteria, we talk about human beings. So this all talks about the three major branches that we will be discussing throughout the biochemistry topics. And so the three major branches are bacteria, eukarya, and archaea, as far as the major organisms. And so continuing on with the study of the cell, you have the membrane bound organelles. And so that includes the mitochondria, which is in animal and in plants. And then you have the chloroplast, which is only presented in plants. And that is depicted right here in the figure. Now, the structural hierarchy of the cellular organism, where you have on the outside the cell wall that is made up of cellulose, which is also made up of sugars. And then you have the membrane. And so you have the plasma membrane made up of proteins, and proteins is made up of amino acids. Then you have where you have that genetic makeup, where this is the nucleus. That is the supramolecular complexes, which is made up of both DNA and protein, and DNA itself is made up of nucleotides. And so there is what we call the ABCs of chemistry. So these are the major topics that we will be diving deep in. The first one is amino acids, which is the makeup of proteins, like I said previously. And these are just examples of 4 amino acids, but there is 20 common amino acids. You can go on to this link to see the rest of the amino acids, but just know that there is not just 20, it is 20 common amino acids. There are more that are outside, but for undergrad type of level of understanding amino acids, we kind of stick to these basic 20 amino acids. Then we have the components of nucleic acids, and those are 3 components, where you have this nitrogenous base, where you have a pyrimidine and a pyridine bases. We'll go more into that details later. And then you have a 5-carbon sugar, where you have the deoxyribose and then just the ribose. And deoxyribose is found in DNA, where the ribose is found in RNA. And then the third component is phosphate, which acts as a backbone to RNA and DNA. And this is more so of the structure of them all together, where you still have that nitrogenous base, you have your 5 carbon sugar, and then you have the phosphate backbone. And these are the different bases, and so they are paired, where you have A and T and G and C, and they're paired by hydrogen bonds. So that is how the coraling of a DNA is happening, and so that is depicted here. And you have these bases that have a hydrogen bonding to have the 2 strands to form DNA, and you still have those phosphate buffers. And then the other component is lipids. And so that one of the examples for lipids and is found in the cell membrane, which is the phospholipid. And so they have an example of that here, where basically you have at the hydrophilic head, which is has affinity to water. You have a phosphate group, and then you have in the backbone glycerol, and then what's attached to the glycerol is you have fatty acids. You can have saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. We will go more in depth with that later on in the semester, but these are once again the major components. And then last but not least, we have the sugar. And so that sugar is the makeup of most carbohydrates that you know that we will need, and we'll have a whole lab and everything where we do experiments with carbohydrates. And that concludes the foundation of biochemistry.